You ever watch a trailer that looks expensive and then the opening weekend hits like a cold slap? 2025 gives us a graveyard of big swings that miss. Some are wounded by timing, some by bad buzz, some by budgets that turn every ticket into debt. Tonight, we count down 10 disasters. Number 1 is The Studio Killer. Number 10, After the Hunt, 2025. After the Hunt walks into 2025 with the kind of pedigree that usually buys a long life. Luca Guadagnino directs. Julia Roberts leads with Ayo Edebiri and Andrew Garfield circling her like storm clouds. The premise is built for award season and social media arguments. A professor, a student, an accusation that spreads faster than truth. It sounds like the sort of adult thriller that used to dominate autumn weekends and live in theaters for months. Then the numbers arrive and the spell breaks. The film opens outside the top 10 with roughly $3.2 million domestically, and it ends up around $9.3 million worldwide. That would be painful for any mid-range drama. It is catastrophic when the reported budget sits around $70 million to $80 million. Even if you love this movie, you can feel the math fighting it. Every new poster and every late-night appearance becomes another shovel of cost on a hole that is already too deep. This is the modern trap for upscale adult cinema. The audience is older. They watch trailers on a phone. They wait for home viewing because the big screen is reserved for dragon superheroes and jump scares. Reviews are mixed. Word of mouth is cautious. A film like this needs passion. It needs a reason to leave the house. Instead, it becomes a headline about decline, not because the craft is dead, but because the market is brutal. If there is any victory here, it is smaller and stranger. The movie may live longer once it hits streaming, where people can pause, rewind, and argue in the comments. It may become that late-night watch that feels risky and sharp when you are alone with it. But as a theatrical bet, it lands like a warning. Even prestige can bleed out fast in 2025. Number 9, In the Lost Lands, 2025. In the Lost Lands sounds like a late-night dream you should not trust. A dark fantasy quest, a cursed world. Dave Bautista as the bruised guide. Mila Jovovich as the witch who trades in dangerous wishes. It is based on a short story by George R.R. Martin, which gives it instant myth weight. And it comes from Paul W. S. Anderson, who knows how to push action into strange locations. On paper, it has cult written all over it. But cult energy does not pay off a theatrical release when the public is not sure what the movie is. The budget is reported at about $55 million, and the worldwide gross sits around $6.2 million. The numbers puts the situation in even harsher terms. It lists the worldwide box office as about 1/10 of the production budget and an opening weekend a little over $1 million. That is not a slow burn. That is a collapse. So what happened? Part of it is timing. 2025 is crowded with loud brands and safe franchises. A strange fantasy film with no giant studio machine behind it can vanish in a single weekend. Part of it is perception. The title feels like a paperback shelf. The marketing has to explain a whole universe in 30 seconds, and it never quite makes the hook land. Is it epic? Is it horror? Is it romance? Audiences hesitate, and hesitation is death at the box office. And yet this kind of bomb can age into something else. Dark fantasy fans love failures because failures carry personality. They have rough edges. They have weird choices. They have scenes that feel like someone fought for them. In the Lost Lands may never recover its theatrical gamble, but it has the right ingredients to become a midnight discovery. The film that people find years later and defend like a secret. Number 8, Shadow Force, 2025. Shadow Force arrives with a promise that feels simple and lethal. Give the audience 2 magnetic stars. Put them in a bruised action thriller. Add betrayal. Add a hunted family. Add a secret unit that wants them erased. In another era, this is the kind of mid-budget crowd pleaser that runs for weeks and pays back on pure adrenaline. Instead, it becomes one of the clearest cautionary tales of 2025. The film costs about $40 million to make, and the worldwide take barely climbs past a few million. That gap is not a stumble. That is a fall through the floor. When a movie like this cannot even find a solid opening weekend, the problem is not just reviews. It is visibility. It is trust. It is the audience saying, I will watch this later if I watch it at all. Because the modern theater has turned into a battlefield where only the loudest brands survive. If you are not a franchise or a giant spectacle, you need a clean hook and a reason to leave the sofa. Shadow Force sells danger and romance and gunfire. But that language is everywhere now. Streaming is flooded with similar posters and similar promises. So the theater crowd looks at it and thinks it will be waiting at home soon. That single thought kills the ticket sale. What makes the failure sting is that the movie is built like a comeback story. It wants to be the tough, slick adult action film that proves the middle still matters. But the box office says the middle is where movies go to disappear. Shadow Force does not just bomb, it vanishes fast. And in 2025, a fast vanish is the worst fate because it gives the film no time to become a word-of-mouth rescue. Number 7. The Alto Knights, 2025. The Alto Knights feels like a prestige package aimed at grown-up moviegoers who miss the weight of old crime sagas. Robert De Niro is the face. The world is suits, backrooms, favors, loyalty. It is the kind of story that used to carry a studio through the quiet months because adults would show up for craft and menace. But 2025 is not built for that habit anymore. The movie arrives with a budget that sits around $45 million, and it struggles to climb beyond the low millions worldwide. That is not simply disappointing. That is the sound of an audience disconnect. The people who love this genre are often at home now. They wait, they stream, they watch in chapters. And the younger crowd treats classic mob drama like a museum exhibit unless the film becomes a viral event. This is where the tragedy lives. A movie like The Alto Knights does not need to be a billion-dollar monster. It just needs steady legs. It needs the feeling that watching it in a theater matters. Instead, it hits a wall of indifference. Not hate, not outrage, just silence. And silence is poison for an adult drama because the algorithm cannot amplify what nobody is talking about. There is also a brutal expectation problem. De Niro in Crime Mode carries a shadow of earlier masterpieces. Audiences compare whether they mean to or not. If the film does not feel essential, it gets treated as optional. Optional becomes later. Later becomes never. So The Alto Knights ends up in the same graveyard as many modern prestige swings. A serious film with serious talent that still cannot break the noise barrier. It does not fail because the genre is dead. It fails because the theater economy has become a place where only urgency survives. Number 6. Mickey 17, 2025. Mickey 17 arrives like a prestige grenade. Bong Joon-ho is back after Parasite. Robert Pattinson plays a man who keeps dying and coming back as a printed replacement. The concept sounds like a sci-fi joke, but the movie treats it like an existential punishment. Every death is paperwork. Every rebirth is another shift in the same cold machine. On screen, it feels bold and strange and human. Behind the curtain, it is also expensive. The budget lands at about $118 million. The worldwide gross settles around $133 million. That number looks big until you remember what it must cover. Production is only the first bite. Marketing is the second bite. Theaters take their cut. Then the studio stares at a worldwide total that sits only a little above production cost and realizes the math is not friendly. The numbers also notes how close the worldwide total is to the budget ratio, which is a brutal way to say it out loud. This is the modern paradox. Original science fiction is beloved in conversation but hard to sell in the moment. Audiences say they want something new. Then they hesitate when the new thing looks weird. Mickey 17 is weird on purpose. It is satire. It is body horror. It is romance and dread and corporate cruelty. That mix makes it memorable. It also makes it harder to pitch in one clean sentence. So the box office becomes a battlefield between art and appetite. The film opens solid, then it runs into the same wall that hits most non-franchise spectacles. People wait, people stream, people tell themselves they will catch it later. Later is the enemy of theatrical recovery. Mickey 17 will likely live a second life. It will be clipped and quoted and dissected. It will become a cult object for people who love smart science fiction. But as a theatrical bet, it lands as a warning shot. Even a famous director and a major star cannot guarantee safety when the idea is daring and the price tag is heavy. Number 5. The Running Man, 2025. The Running Man is built like a crowd pleaser with teeth. Edgar Wright directs. Glenn Powell runs for his life inside a televised death game. The concept is simple. Entertainment becomes a trap. The audience becomes the monster. It is action with a message, and it arrives wearing a big studio budget that expects big studio returns. The budget is reported at about $110 million. The worldwide gross sits around $68 to $69 million. Box Office Mojo shows a worldwide total under $70 million with a domestic share a little over half. The numbers lists the worldwide total as only about 6/10 of the production budget. That is the kind of ratio that turns a cool concept into a cold panic. Why does it hurt so much? Because this is the type of movie that used to be safe. A sharp dystopian thriller, a director with a brand, a star with momentum. It should play like a roller coaster. But 2025 audiences treat original or semi-original studio action like a risk. They want certainty. They want a logo that feels like a guarantee. If they do not get that, they postpone the ticket. It also suffers from a cruel comparison shadow. Any version of The Running Man carries the memory of the older film. People argue about what it should be before they even see what it is. That argument splits interest and steals urgency. So the box office becomes a slow bleed. The opening weekend is not a disaster, but it is not enough. The weeks after do not build the way the budget demands. And once a movie like this is labeled as a stumble, the headlines do the rest. Audiences smell weakness and move on. Number 4. Elio, 2025. Elio should be easy to sell. A lonely kid, a cosmic mix-up, a journey into the kind of bright alien wonder that Pixar built its modern legend on. The film leans into that classic promise. Heart first, comedy second, big glowing worlds after that. It even has the kind of premise that feels like it should play for families all summer. Parents bring kids. Kids beg to see it twice. The soundtrack and the toys and the memes carry it for weeks. But 2025 is cruel to animation that does not feel like a guaranteed event. Elio comes out and the response is not rage. It is a shrug. The numbers lists a production budget of about $150 million and a worldwide gross around $154.1 million. Box Office Mojo shows the worldwide total in the same range. That looks like a break-even story until you remember the missing half of the equation. Marketing, distribution, the cut that theaters take, the cost of being loud enough to be noticed. When a film only matches its budget on gross, it is not a win. It is a warning. This is the new problem for family films. Kids do not decide alone. Parents decide the outing. They compare trailers. They compare value. They think about the heat and the traffic and the price of snacks. If the movie does not feel urgent, they wait for the home release. That means Elio has to fight for every weekend, and if the opening is soft, it becomes even harder to reverse the story. The heartbreak is that Elio is not a messy product. It is a sincere film that wants to connect, but the box office teaches the studio a cold lesson. Even a beloved brand name can stumble if the market decides it can wait. Elio becomes a quiet bomb, the kind that hurts because it is not scandal. It is simply a big, expensive film that never becomes the moment. Number 3. Tron Aries, 2025. Tron Aries is built like a neon dare, a legacy title with a cult following, a futuristic look that begs for the biggest screen. A marketing hook that practically writes itself. Light bikes, digital gods, the feeling that the real world might get infected by the grid. This is the kind of movie that should live on premium formats and sell the experience, not just the story. Then the receipts show up and the glow turns harsh. The numbers lists a production budget of $180 million and a worldwide gross around $142.2 million. Wikipedia reports the same worldwide total, and it frames the result as an underperformer. That is a brutal gap even before the marketing bill enters the room. It means the film has to run harder just to reach neutral, and it never finds the legs. This is the danger of nostalgia sequels. The fans are loud, but not always large. They want the vibe, they want the sound, they want the old magic. But general audiences need clarity. They need a reason to care beyond the brand. Tron is cool. Cool alone is not enough in 2025 when the calendar is packed with franchises that promise comfort and certainty. Tron Aries also carries a weird identity problem. It wants to be sleek sci-fi. It also wants to be emotional. It wants to be a standalone ride. It also wants to be part of a myth. That split makes the film feel like a dream that some viewers cannot fully grab, so the box office becomes front-loaded. Opening weekend curiosity, then a fast drop as the world moves on. And that is why this one stings. Tron Aries is not small. It is not cheap. It is a swing that needs a home run. Instead, it lands as a neon bruising. Number 2. Disney's Snow White 2025. Disney sells Snow White like a sure thing. A story every generation already knows. A built-in family audience. A theatrical window that should print money on pure nostalgia. The trouble is that nostalgia does not pay a giant bill if the crowd stays home. This version lands in 2025 with a production budget reported at about $269 million. The worldwide gross ends up around $205.6 million. On paper, that is still a huge number. In reality, it is a siren. Because box office gross is not what the studio keeps. Theaters take their cut. Marketing costs pile up. The gap between cost and return becomes a hole you can hear. That hole gets deeper because the film never becomes a must-see event. It becomes a debate. It becomes noise. The kind of noise that makes casual families hesitate. And hesitation is deadly now. When parents hesitate, they choose the safer outing or they wait for the home release. The Hollywood Reporter points out the bomb territory problem with a production budget around $270 million plus a marketing spend that can add roughly another $100 million. Deadline later estimates the film is headed toward an overall loss around $115 million once all the downstream revenue is counted. This is why Snow White hurts. It is not just a film that underperforms, it is a brand test that fails in public. Disney built an entire live-action pipeline on the idea that these remakes are safe. Snow White proves that the formula can break. When a studio spends at this level, the movie has to feel like an event. Snow White does not. It feels optional. And optional is the word that kills big-budget cinema. Number 1. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, 2025. This is the studio killer on the list because the numbers are unreal. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning carries a reported production budget of about $400 million. That is not just expensive, that is history-level expensive. One of those rare movies where every extra delay and every extra stunt turns into another truck of cash backing up to the set. Now, look at the box office. The worldwide total sits around $598.8 million. That sounds gigantic until you measure it against the budget. The numbers spells it out in plain math. Worldwide box office is about 1.5 times the production budget. That is not enough for comfort because this is not the money the studio keeps. This is the gross before splits, before marketing, before distribution, before the real accounting knife comes out. So the film becomes a paradox. It is one of the biggest hits of the year, and it can still feel like a financial crisis. That is what makes it terrifying. The movie is not rejected, it is watched, it is supported, and yet the break-even mountain is so high that even a strong run can leave scars. Hollywood Reporter calls out the challenge of a $400 million net budget before marketing. This is how you tank a studio without making a flop. You build a movie so massive that success still tastes like panic. If the margins go wrong even slightly, the impact is felt across the slate. Fewer risks. Smaller mid-budget films get cut. Future sequels get pressured to shrink. The final reckoning may recover more value through home viewing and streaming. But as a theatrical business story, it is the loudest warning of 2025. These are not just flops, they are warning lights on the same dashboard. 2025 proves that budgets can be the real villain. A movie can be decent and still drown. A movie can be popular and still bleed. And the scariest part is what comes next. Studios will chase safer logos,